Hey, everybody. Welcome to day 13 of Get Out of the Rat Race Rut. I'm Beth Campbell. I'm a career coach and mentor, author, podcaster, working on being a speaker, bit of a dork. But I'm also a former corporate captive, and I'm now helping people find their work wonderland. So if you need someone to help you through a career or life challenge, please send me a message or go to bethannecampbell.com/coach me. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching live, let me know you're here in the comments. If you're watching the replay, give me a hashtag replay. And of course, let me know if you have any questions or feedback, and I will address it at the end of this episode or on a future episode. So happy Friday the 13th. Hopefully you're not superstitious. It is Friday the 13th. I know surprisingly a lot of people who think the 13th is lucky. In fact, one of them being my amazing uncle, who just published a book called The Broken Spoke about his, it's basically about his childhood abuse, horrible abuse at the hands of my grandparents. And then he went into addiction and eventually recovered and faced his demons, and he's doing really well and published his book. So I'm so proud of him. And so shout out to you, Mike, because it's the 13th today. So all right, on to our topic. So one of the questions that comes up a lot in the career coaching realm, and I've been asked it myself, I've asked it of myself, can I or should I trust my boss? And this usually comes up in the context of leaving your job. Like, should I tell my boss that I'm looking for another job? Should I tell my boss I'm applying for another job or even applying for another role within my company? Should I tell my boss I had an interview? But it could be anything. Should I tell my boss I'm having mental health challenges, or I'm getting burned out, or I'm going through a divorce? Or here's a good one, which I've heard from, unfortunately, too many people. Should I trust my boss to give me credit for the work I do, like during a presentation, right? You'd be surprised. Anyway, so should you be very open and honest, or should you hold back with your boss, even if they're like the best, you have a great relationship, they're the best boss ever? Like if I were your boss. Well, if I were your boss, I hope that my former team members would all tell you that you can tell me anything. I would always have your back, and I would not, throw you under the bus ever. So, you wouldn't have to worry about this if I were your boss. But okay, so I always have to have a caveat. I'm going to have to have a disclaimer. If you fear retaliation or some other negative impact to being open, especially if significant, like, you know what I'm talking about, like you have a really, really horrible boss, just tread lightly and just consider, maybe consulting an attorney or a labor attorney, and maybe keep things. This is going to be one of those it depends kind of episodes. So, and it's also going to be, in this particular case, a session about do as I say, not necessarily as I do, because with one exception in 23 years in the corporate world, I had great bosses, great leaders, and I did talk about all of these things and more. My boss at my first professional job, he set the bar for all future bosses, for me, and really for the entire population of the world for all of eternity. As a boss, he was the perfect combination of supportive, honest, transparent, trusting, empowering. He was a great listener. He was receptive to constructive criticism. I mean, some of the things I've said to him in the past. And there was not an atom of overinflated ego in his body. If I shined, he shined. When they put the textbook on good leadership together, they modeled it after him. And the thing is that like he had no idea. He had no idea how good he was. He was just like a guy just doing a great job. And I told him everything. I told him when I was restless in my role and I was looking at other opportunities within the company. I told him when I was looking for another job. And again, it wasn't him. It was just I needed opportunity and I needed change, and it was the company. I told him when I'd been approached by other people who were interested in recruiting me to go to their company or their department. I told him when I was happy. I told him when I was feeling down. I expressed anger to him about things without fear of repercussions or retaliation. With every fiber of my being, I trusted that he had my best interests at heart, and he would always do right by me and always have my back. And he always did. I could not have had a better role model for what true leadership is. And it was very similar with my next boss, the guy who was able to pull me away from that first job, right? Again, I had complete trust. He would have my back, champion for me, be transparent, be honest, and he completely was. And I was honest about him, about everything, with zero worry that it would come back to haunt me. And by the way, neither of these bosses were pushovers. I mean, they weren't like, just letting people walk all over them. They were real with me, and they told me what I needed to hear sometimes. So I've had great bosses with one exception, and I think that says a lot in 23 years. You'd think as much as I rail against the machine and call out bad leadership, that I would have had a string of really shitty managers, but the truth is I haven't, mostly. I can't say the same for people that are higher up on the corporate food chain or other so-called leaders that I didn't report to directly, like, people I was involved with in projects or just higher up on the food chain. But with my direct bosses, it has been mostly a really great experience. But would I recommend that you have the same deep trust in your boss that I did in mine? If you don't have a good and established relationship with your boss, then don't tell them things like, I'm looking for another job. That's a no-brainer, right? You don't owe them anything, and it could backfire on you. If you do have a good and established and trusting relationship with your boss, then it might be okay to share these things, but understand that there is always risk. No matter how great your relationship is, there's always risk. I had risk. As great as my bosses were, there was risk there. So be prepared for it and just be careful. And again, like many things, it just depends. So I'm going to break it down a little bit here. Let's take the common scenario that you're dissatisfied with your current job and you're thinking about looking for a new challenge, maybe outside of the company, or maybe you've already started doing that. Assuming you have a good relationship, what's the benefit in sharing that with your boss? Are you hoping maybe that they're going to give you some incentive to stay? Like maybe you don't really want to leave, but you want a promotion or a raise or just want to do something different. That was certainly the case in my with most of my bosses. If I had if I wanted to do something different, or if the brain just started saying you need something new. If that's the case, if you trust your boss, you might have that conversation, but I wouldn't frame it like I'm going to go looking for a job. I might frame it like, hey boss, I'm feeling restless and I could use some new responsibilities. What do I need to do to level up? Right? That's what I would do with my boss. If you're actually looking for another job and you really do want to leave, like maybe your boss is cool, but it's just like for me, it was just the company, the chaos, right? And I just needed something different. There's not really much benefit to telling them until you have your offer. No matter what your relationship with your boss, good, bad, or ugly, you risk that your boss might feel obligated to assume that you're out of here and start pushing you out sooner rather than later. And you could be like 6 months from your next opportunity with your job search. So, what now? This actually happened to my husband once. We were moving out of state because of my job, and he told his boss. Now, our move was still months away, but the boss told my husband that he was going to have to start looking for a backfill now. He's like, hey, now that you've told me, I kind of have to look. And they had a great relationship. They're still friends today. The other thing is, if you share this, they probably won't consider you for any internal opportunities. So given that you're, going to be leaving at some point, why would they, right? And that might be fine if you're looking to go elsewhere. There's probably a reason for it, right? But still, maybe if you're not quite sure, that's a consideration. A lot of people get caught up in loyalty to their boss or company. Like you want to tell them as a courtesy because you think it's the right thing to do, right? But remember, for most of you, your company, your boss, no matter how awesome you think they are, they can fire you or let you go at will on the spot with little or no explanation, and they will do that if needed or if pushed. If you're looking for another job, especially at another company, there's a reason that you're doing that. And maybe it's not your boss, but that alone should just give you food for thought on being too open about it with your management team. Because remember, it's not always your boss. Sometimes it's the people above them, right? Who don't have that relationship with you. And can you trust your boss to not say anything to them, right? bosses have ethics, right? I probably didn't. I probably wouldn't have said anything, but in fact, didn't say anything. I knew many times that my team members were just tired of the company and never said anything. But I'm not saying you should, again, I'm not saying you should do as I say, just do as I say, don't do as I do necessarily. Okay, so let's take another scenario. Like, should you trust your boss and tell them like you're super stressed out and overwhelmed? First of all, mental health should be a top priority for every company, but sadly, we know that it's not. First thing that you should ask yourself if you're in this situation is why are you stressed out and overwhelmed? Is it work related? Like maybe you have too many assignments. Is this something that you can have a conversation with your boss about and then try to get some things off your plate? Or do you think your boss is going to like fly off the handle and blow a nut, in which case you might just start shoring up your resume? Do you need time off? Do you need reasonable accommodation? All of these things are things that you should be able to talk to your boss about. You should be able to in an ideal world. If you can't because your boss isn't receptive or you fear retaliation, then again, maybe it's time to reconsider that situation and look at your options. Even if your boss is awesome, you should be careful about what you reveal about your personal life. They may have or feel they have an ethical or legal obligation to use that information in a way that might not end up benefiting you, even if they don't mean it that way, or the company might, right? So again, should you trust your boss? It depends. It depends on the relationship you have with your boss. It depends on the specific situation. It depends sometimes on company policy or ethics or law. It depends on how big the risks are and how willing are you to accept them. If your intuition is cautioning you, then you might want to hold back on revealing anything to your boss that isn't required legally, ethically, or based on company policy. And when in doubt, consult a professional, a labor attorney, or a career coach if your situation is unclear. So I'm not going to kid you. This is a tough one for me because I do feel like I'm biased because I've had such awesome bosses for 22 of 23 years. And also take this with a grain of salt because I'm also the type of person who just instinctively speaks out. I own my shit 100%. Most days I just don't give a F. And honestly, I did not ever even think about this question until my last boss in the last 6 months before I got laid off. Before that, I had never even considered not being fully open. But I've seen a lot of people that trust their boss and they get thrown under the bus when push comes to shove. So proceed with caution. And if you need any guidance on a situation that you're not sure how to handle with your boss, send me a DM or go to bethannecampbell.com/coachme and let's work through those that depends scenarios. Okay. I see no comments today, so it's a little quiet. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about what do you do? How do you respond when you're asked, tell me a little bit about yourself, or what do you do in the context of your career? Yep, it's a common question and one that we usually aren't prepared for, so that'll be a good one. All right. Oh, and Stephanie did pop in here. I got a comment. Trust your intuition. Be careful what you put in writing. Check on your mood when you have that conversation. I would say be careful what you put in writing, but I would also say it's very important to put things in writing, especially if you have a boss who is can be retaliatory, right? Retaliatory, is that a word? Who can retaliate? So yeah, you don't want to put anything angry or whatever in writing, but you do want to get everything in writing. It's very, very difficult, especially if you end up, having a case about something if you don't have it in writing. So just, use your smarts on that one. Thank you, Stephanie, for that. All right. Don't forget to connect with me here on Facebook or LinkedIn if you aren't already. And thank you so much for joining Get Out of the Rat Race Rut. You're here because you are a badass. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I'll see you tomorrow.